For almost 30 years, Pokemon has been one of Nintendo's must-have franchises, as important as Mario or The Legend of Zelda. With over 60 different games and a whopping 440 million copies sold worldwide, it's been a big part of our childhood. However, with an aging fan base with new expectations on the horizon, recently more than just one type of Pokemon game we love has appeared. These games have evolved from being fan-made clones to even full-on game launches that shook the world. In this video, Fetch'd will explore why these games threaten to steal the spotlight from our beloved Pokemon. Could the once mighty giant bounce back and understand why its fans might not be as excited as they used to be? Why we have a soft spot for Pokemon. Pokemon stands as one of the most successful gaming franchises in history. It started way back in 1996 on Nintendo's Game Boy, and now it's this super famous RPG that even non-gamers know about. A report from Fandom a couple of years back claimed Pokemon is the most valuable game saga ever, grossed an estimated $150 billion in lifetime revenue. To understand its success, we have to travel back to the 90s, when HD was more like 360p. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, Pokemon was at its peak, way more popular than the games now. The initial generations, Pokemon Red and Blue, still hold the record for the best-selling entries in the series, with 31.37 million copies shipped. In fact, before their launch, the Game Boy was kind of fading away as hardly anyone used it. But then Pokemon came along. According to Polygon, the release of Pokemon Red and Blue would reinvigorate the Game Boy around the globe, along the way kicking off another multi-billion-dollar franchise. These games not only kickstarting a franchise that captured countless hearts, but also propelled the Game Boy to the pinnacle of popularity. When Pokemon first hit the scene on the Game Boy, it was like a cool breeze in the world of 8-bit RPGs. At that time, there were many games that let people fight with other humans, with visuals trying to mimic real world. For example, Metal Slug, Wolfenstein 3D, or even Doom 2. Pokemon, however, took full advantage of Game Boy's lower pixel count, letting players imagine what a fantasy world of Pokemon would feel like with just a few pixels. Feeling rain in Fortree City didn't have to look real. Beyond that, Pokemon's fantasy influenced game mechanics. Turn-based battles with moves that were not realistic and where you call the shots, and having them duke it out with each other gave players a sense of control over their progression. Players could strategize moves to learn and forget in order to progress through the game. Pokemon also made us hunt for Pokemon in the wild, ensuring that the hard work we put in was paid off with levels and stats that could help us achieve more in the game. For example, catching a rare, shiny Pokemon took effort and time, and this translated to fans being proud of what they caught, sharing them with their friends. In simpler terms, Pokemon is all about exploring to find monsters and getting better at a sport. That puts us in the shoes of the characters, and we get why they do what they do. The game has something for everyone, from wanting to complete the Pokédex to loving the whole Pokemon growth journey. Even tactics and competition are huge in the Pokemon community. Pokemon was a fun game that embraced a wide array of involvement, from people who just want to beat the Elite Four to those completionists who really want to catch them all. The story appealed to childhood dreams that easily translate to nostalgia. These days, there's this nostalgic vibe that's hard to shake off. I'm sure that for those of you who have played Pokemon, you would remember the excitement and difficulty of choosing your starter Pokemon. Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle. Man, those were some tough times. Anyways, this nostalgia is also why many of its main titles have been performing exceptionally well. With Pokemon Sword and Shield and the more recent Pokemon Scarlet and Violet surpassing the 20 million games sold mark, it's something that hadn't happened since the distant Pokemon Gold and Silver. However, with recent releases, a pretty common complaint in the fandom is that the gameplay, the concept, and even the game mechanics tend to stay the same in each release. It's pretty evident when you put the past few variants of Pokemon games beside each other. This is evident when we compare Pokemon Violet, Pokemon Sword, and Pokemon Brilliant Diamond. It's always about completing the Pokédex, going on a journey to snag all your favorite Pokemon for your team, and battling your way to being the top trainer in the region. Though typical of a product, they have tried adding many innovative features such as Dynamax, Rotom Bike, Triple Battles, and Sky Battles. However, amongst all, most of their features were removed, if not slowly phased out after one generation. There's a saying, "Don't fix what isn't broken," and it seems to fit well here, at least for the people at Game Freak who really has been sticking to the same formula. But there's a bunch of players who don't quite agree and have taken it upon themselves to enhance what they think can be improved. And that's where ROM hacking comes in, fans tweaking these features to make them their own. How the community took over Pokemon's innovation. ROM hacking lets players create unique experiences, like tossing in new characters, spicing up graphics, or tweaking game rules. Some brilliant examples are Pokemon Reborn, Pokemon Legends of the Arena, Pokemon Fired Red Rocket Edition, and Pokemon Insurgents. In these games were innovative features that fans were too impatient to wait for Game Freak to implement. Within the Pokemon community, this practice has been going on for years. Some argue that hackers are just trying to make the Pokemon experience more awesome, showing their love for this iconic franchise. But Nintendo doesn't quite agree with this. Back in 2016, there was this ambitious ROM hack called Pokemon Prism. It had a new region and a fresh story, but Nintendo shut it down, claiming it messed with their intellectual property rights. And it's not a one-time thing. Nintendo has been fighting against video game pirates for a while. In 2022, a Nintendo hacker named Gary Bowser got a 40-month jail term for making and selling devices with pirated games. Rome Universe also got hit. They had to trash their pirated games and pay Nintendo $2 million. Recently, a ROM site owner, Distorage, got told by the Paris Court of Appeals to pay $442,750, about $484,000, to Nintendo, plus an extra $25,000 for legal fees. Nintendo had asked Distorage to take down their unauthorized Nintendo games on their site, onefishier.com. When Distorage didn't comply, Nintendo took them to court. The Paris Judicial Court said Distorage was in the wrong in May 2021, and recently the Court of Appeals just backed that up. All of these cases just show that if the game creators don't spice things up enough, someone else will, legal or not. Enter Palworld. Palworld, and its giant community backing. The arrival of this new game, Palworld, has got many people excited and possibly keeping those behind the desks at Nintendo on their toes. Palworld, made by the Japanese studio Pocket Pair, recently came out on early access for PC and Xbox, and it's already a hit with more than 1 million consecutive players. The creator even bragged about 2 million sales in just 24 hours. And if you look at the visuals, doesn't it remind you of something oddly familiar? Palworld positions itself as a mix of adorable creatures and more challenging gameplay mechanics. The success came with controversy because it's easy to draw comparisons between this game and Pokemon. Indeed, that's something we can't deny. The creatures in Palworld look a lot like Pokemon at first glance. Quick on the draw, YouTuber Toasted Shoes showed off a mod made by users for Palworld. It turns those Pokemon-like creatures and characters into real Pokemon spots we all know. Nintendo probably isn't too thrilled about this twist, though. But hey, it looks like a blast. Pokemon with guns, that's what everyone's calling it. It's the wild dream of players who've always wanted their Pokemon to pack some serious firepower. Something Nintendo probably won't deliver anytime soon based on the list of features removed we saw just now. In Palworld's defense, most of its success can be credited not because of their similarity to Pokemon, but rather their unique selling points such as a different game mechanism, like shooting and even building your base. There are also some less obvious reasons why Palworld is a hit. First off, on PC, where most people are buying it, you can't legally get your hands on a Pokemon game. Sure, you can go the old-school illegal route with ROMs or jump through hoops to emulate a Pokemon game, but you won't find Pokemon on platforms like Steam. They've stuck to Nintendo and mobiles, and there's a crowd out there hungry for something different. These two reasons alone can be sufficient for Palworld to differentiate themselves from Pokemon. Nevertheless, what Palworld is bringing to the market is allowing Pokemon fans to further support Palworld's success because they think that Pokemon Company hasn't been innovating enough lately. Of course, this big success for Palworld might not make Pokemon suddenly add guns to the next game, but having a strong competitor could push Pokemon to freshen up a series that some fans think is getting outdated. The question is, will Pokemon be able to cut through this fog and continue claiming its top spot? And will you subscribe to Fetch'd for more investigations?